Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Daybreak filtered through the slats, painting the cluttered apartment in alternating bands of shadow and light. Hunched over a laptop, its screen glowing in the dimness, sat an individual cloaked in the attire of the everyday, a white t-shirt stretched across their back and blue jeans, faded and frayed. Brown hair, tangled from hours spent vying with the keyboard, framed their face. On screen, an email loomed, its subject line taunting. Final interview. The countdown begins. The cursor blinked, beckoning a response, but their fingers, suspended above the keys, betrayed no intention to move. A sigh, heavy with anticipation, escaped as they read the message yet again, no trace of excitement animating their features. Staff writer opportunity, an exclusive invitation for you, Reynolds. Rather than correct her, Wilder had simply let it slide. It hadn't seemed important then. But now, with an in-person interview scheduled for tomorrow morning, reality was crashing down. A hand ran through short brown hair, tugging at the ends in frustration. One more rejection letter would break something essential. 6 months of job hunting had yielded nothing but automated responses and polite dismissals.
"It's not like I can show up tomorrow dressed as a woman,"
Wilder muttered, getting up to pace the small living room.
"That would be insane."
Sleep came fitfully that night, dreams filled with interview scenarios that ended in humiliation. By morning, dark circles had formed beneath Wilder's eyes, visible in the bathroom mirror as teeth were hastily brushed. The reflection showed a person at a crossroads, 32 years old, career stalled, savings dwindling. The sensible choice was to email the magazine, explain the misunderstanding, and withdraw the application. The sensible choice was to continue the grueling job search. The sensible choice was... 45 minutes later, Wilder stood in front of a department store, doors just opening for the day. Heart pounding with an unfamiliar rhythm, feet carried forward as if operating independently from rational thought. "Can I help you find something?" A sales associate approached with practiced cheerfulness. I need... The words stuck momentarily. "I need business attire. For a job interview." "Men's department is..." "Women's, actually." The correction came out as barely more than a whisper. The associate, to her credit, recovered quickly. "Of course. What sort of look are you going for?" 2 hours and a significant credit card charge later, Wilder returned to the apartment with several shopping bags. The contents were spread across the bed, a knee-length navy blue skirt, a cream-colored blouse with a tasteful bow at the neck, flesh-toned pantyhose, and sensible black pumps with a modest heel. A quick visit to a nearby beauty supply store had yielded some basic makeup essentials and a medium-length brown wig that matched Wilder's natural hair color. The transformation took longer than anticipated. YouTube tutorials played on the laptop as inexperienced hands attempted to apply foundation, eyeliner, and lipstick. The wig required extensive adjustment. The clothing felt foreign against skin, the pantyhose particularly strange and constricting. When finally complete, Wilder stood before the full-length mirror on the back of the bathroom door. The person staring back was different. Not entirely convincing upon close inspection, perhaps, but passable at a glance. The brown wig framed the face softly, lending a gentleness to features that had never before seemed particularly masculine or feminine. "Hello, Margot," Wilder said to the reflection, trying out the name that had come to mind during the shopping excursion. It felt right, somehow. Sophisticated, professional, confident. everything Wilder needed to be for this interview. Sleep was impossible that night. The alarm clock was unnecessary the next morning. With shaking hands, makeup was reapplied, the brown wig carefully positioned, and the interview outfit donned with painstaking attention to detail. The fashion-forward offices occupied 3 floors of a sleek downtown building. The elevator ride to the 22nd floor seemed to take both an eternity and no time at all. When the doors slid open, they revealed a reception area that matched the magazine's aesthetic perfectly, modern, minimalist, with strategic pops of bold color.
"I'm here for an interview with Miss Harrington," came the carefully practiced voice, higher than natural, but hopefully not artificially so. "Margot Reynolds." The receptionist smiled warmly. "She's expecting you. Right this way." Following through glass doors into an open-concept office space, Wilder, now Margot, fought to maintain composure. Women in stylish attire moved purposefully between desks, conversation humming beneath the soft indie music playing through hidden speakers. Everyone looked so effortlessly put together, so unquestionably belonging in this space.
"Margot!" A tall woman with a silver-streaked bob approached, hand extended.
"Vivian Harrington, we spoke on the phone. So wonderful to finally meet you in person."
The handshake was firm, but brief. Vivian's sharp eyes performed a quick assessment, lingering momentarily on the slightly askew brown wig before returning to make direct eye contact. "Thank you for having me," Margot replied, silently congratulating herself on maintaining the feminine voice. "Let's chat in my office." Vivian gestured toward a glass-walled room at the far end of the floor. "Coffee? Tea?" "Coffee would be wonderful." Seated across from Vivian with a steaming mug of expensive-smelling coffee, Margot felt simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. The interview began conventionally enough. Questions about previous writing experience, familiarity with the magazine's content, ideas for potential articles. "Your portfolio shows remarkable versatility," Vivian noted, scrolling through a tablet. "Though I notice most of your published pieces have been under the byline W. Reynolds. Is there a reason for that?" A momentary panic. "I've always felt my full name was a bit unconventional. Some publications preferred the initial." "Well, at Fashion Forward, we celebrate the unconventional." Vivian set down the tablet. "What makes your perspective unique, Margot? Why should our readers hear from you?" The question hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. In that moment, something shifted. Perhaps it was desperation, perhaps inspiration, but Margot decided to answer with a version of the truth. "I see women's experiences from an unusual vantage point. I've spent much of my life observing how society treats women differently, the expectations, the limitations, the unspoken rules. I think I can write about those things with both empathy and analytical distance." Vivian leaned forward, suddenly more engaged. "That's exactly the perspective we've been missing. Someone who can articulate the female experience while maintaining enough distance to question it." The rest of the interview passed in something of a blur. By the time Margot stood to leave, Vivian was already discussing potential start dates and salary expectations. "The position is yours if you want it," she said finally. "We need someone who can start next Monday. Is that feasible?" Standing at another crossroads, Margot made the choice that would alter everything that followed. "Absolutely. I'll be ready." The weekend passed in a whirlwind of activity. The small savings Wilder had been hoarding for emergencies was invested in a complete professional wardrobe. Colorful A-line dresses, stylish blazers in pastel shades, sensible yet fashionable shoes, and an assortment of accessories to complete various looks. Hours were spent practicing makeup application, walking in heels, and modulating vocal patterns. Most importantly, the apartment transformed. Male clothing was packed away in storage containers and hidden in the back of the closet. Bathroom counters now displayed an array of skincare products and cosmetics. Bookshelves were reorganized, furniture rearranged, creating space for Margot to exist fully. Monday morning dawned bright and clear. Dressed in a forest green dress with a cream cardigan, brown hair now styled more naturally and secured with product rather than pins, Margot Reynolds entered the fashion-forward offices as a new employee. The first week was challenging in unexpected ways. The technical aspects of the job were straightforward enough: researching topics, conducting interviews, drafting articles. But navigating the social dynamics of an all-female workplace required constant vigilance. "Do you have plans for lunch?" a fellow writer named Diana asked on Wednesday. "A few of us usually grab something at the cafe downstairs." "I'd love to join," Margot replied, heart rate increasing at the prospect of casual conversation. The lunch group turned out to be 5 women from various departments, all roughly in their 30s, all clearly comfortable with each other. As they claimed a table and unwrapped sandwiches, Margot prepared mentally for an interrogation. "So, Vivian practically hired you on the spot," said a woman named Rebecca. "That never happens. What's your secret?" Margot smiled, carefully dabbing at the corner of her mouth with a napkin to avoid smudging her lipstick. "Honestly, I think my portfolio just happened to fill a specific gap they had." "Don't be modest," Diana interjected. "Your piece on women's invisible labor was brilliant. I read it when Vivian was circulating your samples, the way you broke down how society conditions women to take on certain responsibilities without recognition. I've never seen it articulated quite that way before." "Thank you," Margot said, genuinely touched. "It's a topic I feel strongly about." The conversation flowed more easily after that, covering everything from workplace gossip to television shows to dating disasters. Margot mostly listened, offering occasional comments and filing away details that might help with integration. By Friday, a routine had begun to establish itself. Mornings spent at her assigned desk, researching and writing, afternoons often including meetings or interviews, evenings alone in the apartment practicing and preparing for the next day. The first bylined piece appeared in the digital edition 3 weeks after Margot started. "The Performance of Femininity, What We Gain and Lose Behind the Mask," analyzed how women modulate their appearance, speech, and behavior in different contexts. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. "This is resonating with readers in a big way," Vivian announced, dropping by Margot's desk with a tablet displaying analytics. "Comments are pouring in. Social shares are through the roof. Whatever perspective you're writing from, keep doing it." Months passed. Summer turned to fall. The brown wig was eventually discarded as Wilder's natural hair grew out, carefully styled into a feminine bob that framed the face that now rarely went without makeup. Voice exercises were practiced daily until the higher register became natural, mannerisms refined until they were unconscious. The apartment no longer contained visible traces of Wilder. Even in private moments, Margot remained. The distinction between performance and identity began to blur, then disappear entirely. "We're doing a feature section on gender for the March issue," Vivian explained during an editorial meeting in January. "Margot, I'd like you to take point on this. Your writing on women's experiences has been some of our most insightful content." Seated at the conference table in a burgundy dress with gold accessories, legs crossed at the ankle, Margot nodded professionally while internally processing the irony. "I'd be honored. Any specific direction you're thinking?" "Complete creative freedom," Vivian replied. though I'd love something that really challenges readers' assumptions. The assignment consumed Margot's thoughts for days. Eventually, an approach crystallized, a series of interviews with people who had experienced life from different gender perspectives, exploring what those transitions revealed about society's treatment of men versus women. Finding interview subjects required delicate networking. Through online forums and support groups, Margot connected with individuals willing to share their stories, transgender men and women at various stages of transition, as well as those who moved between gender presentations for various reasons. The interviews were profound, often emotional experiences. Sitting across from people who had made conscious choices about gender identity, who had carefully examined what it meant to present as male or female in the world, Margot recognized something familiar in their stories. The first time someone held a door for me after I began presenting as female, I nearly cried, one interviewee confided. Not because I needed help with the door, but because it was the first time I felt seen as who I really was. Another shared, I miss being able to walk alone at night without fear. I never realized that was a privilege until I lost it. After each interview, Margot returned to the apartment and wrote late into the night, weaving these stories together with careful analysis. The writing felt different, more personal, more urgent. By the submission deadline, the piece had evolved from a feature article into something more substantial. Living between what gender transition teaches us about power, privilege, and identity. Vivian called Margot into her office the day after receiving the draft. Seated behind her immaculate desk, expression unreadable, she gestured to the visitor's chair. This isn't what I expected, she began, tapping a perfectly manicured nail against her tablet. Margot's stomach dropped. I'm sorry if it's not what you were looking for. I can revise. It's better. Vivian leaned forward. Much better. Raw, authentic, important. But I have to ask, what inspired this approach? The writing feels deeply personal, especially in the analysis sections. The moment stretched, possibilities branching in multiple directions. For the first time in nearly a year, Margot considered telling the truth. Instead, carefully chosen words emerged. I've done a lot of listening, a lot of observing, and I've come to believe that gender is more complex than most people acknowledge. Vivian nodded slowly. The piece needs minimal editing. We're making it the cover story. The March issue featuring Margot's article generated unprecedented response. Reader emails flooded in. Social media buzzed with discussion, and several national news programs requested interviews with the author.
Good Morning America wants you on Thursday, Vivian announced one Monday morning, appearing beside Margot's desk with an expression of barely contained excitement. This is huge exposure for the magazine.
Terror gripped Margot's chest. Television? I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that level of visibility. You've become our star writer. People want to hear from you. Vivian's tone made clear this wasn't really a request. Media training tomorrow, studio visit Wednesday, on-air Thursday. The next days passed in a haze of anxiety. The media trainer, a former news anchor named Patricia, worked with Margot on concise answers, camera angles, and managing nervous habits. You have a tendency to touch your hair when you're uncomfortable, Patricia noted during their session. On camera, that reads as insecurity. Try folding your hands in your lap instead. Margot nodded, consciously lowering a hand that had indeed been moving toward her brown hair. Will they ask about my personal life? They'll try to establish a connection between you and your subject matter. Keep responses focused on your research rather than yourself, and you'll be fine. The morning of the interview, Margot selected a forest green dress with structured shoulders and three-quarter sleeves, professional, telegenic, and confidence-boosting. Hair and makeup took longer than usual, every detail scrutinized with nervous attention. The television studio was disorienting. Massive cameras, bright lights, crew members moving with practiced efficiency. A production assistant with a clipboard guided Margot to a green room to wait, then to makeup for final touches, and finally to the set where the host's professional warmth created an illusion of intimate conversation. We're speaking today with Margot Reynolds, whose article on gender transition has sparked national conversation, the female host began after the introduction package played. Margot, what inspired you to tackle this subject? Folding her hands in her lap as practiced, Margot smiled. I've always been interested in how our gendered experiences shape our understanding of the world. By speaking with people who have lived on both sides of that divide, we gain unique insight into social structures we often take for granted. The article suggests you personally believe gender is largely a social performance rather than an innate identity, the male host commented. Has that perspective been controversial among your readers? A momentary panic flared. This hadn't been part of the pre-interview questions. Actually, what my research suggests is that gender encompasses both social performance and deeply felt identity. The individuals I interviewed describe an alignment process, bringing their external presentation into harmony with their internal sense of self. The hosts nodded approvingly, and the interview continued more comfortably from there. By the final question, about future projects, Margot had settled into a rhythm, articulating points with growing confidence. Back at the magazine offices later that day, colleagues offered congratulations, and Vivian presented a bottle of champagne. To our rising star, she toasted as paper cups were distributed around the department. And to the new book deal I just got off the phone discussing with HarperCollins. Book deal? Margot nearly spilled her champagne. They want to expand your article into a full-length book. Same concept. More in-depth interviews. Broader analysis. Vivian's smile was triumphant. I took the liberty of expressing your interest. They're drawing up an offer as we speak. That evening, alone in the apartment, Margot sat on the edge of the bed and considered how thoroughly one impulsive decision had transformed everything. The career that had once seemed hopelessly stalled was now ascendant. The identity that had begun as disguise had become something else entirely. Opening the laptop, Margot navigated to a folder of personal documents and found one labeled simply W. Inside was a letter, written months ago but never sent, addressed to parents who had received only brief, vague updates about their child's new job and busy life in the city. There's something I need to tell you, the letter began. The person you've known as your son has been on a journey of self-discovery. The words blurred as tears formed. With sudden clarity, Margot realized the dual life had become unsustainable. The success, the recognition, the future opportunities, they all belonged to Margot Reynolds, not to Wilder. The person who had entered that job interview in borrowed clothes and a hastily purchased wig no longer existed, except in memory. Reaching for the phone, Margot dialed a number that had been researched but never called. Dr. Bennett's office, a receptionist answered. I'd like to make an appointment, Margot said, voice steady despite the emotion behind it, for a consultation about hormone therapy. The following weeks brought a cascade of changes. The medical appointments were just the beginning. Legal name change paperwork was filed. Coming out conversations, carefully crafted versions of the truth, were held with friends, distant colleagues, and eventually, family. The book contract was negotiated and signed under the name Margot Reynolds. Through it all, work at the magazine continued. Margot's articles broadened in scope, but maintained the unique perspective that had captured readers' attention. The gender feature had opened doors to exploring other complex social issues, power dynamics in relationships, evolving definitions of success, the hidden costs of conformity. 1 year to the day after the fateful job interview, Margot sat across from Vivian during their weekly editorial meeting. Now dressed in a plum-colored dress with subtle gold jewelry, brown hair styled in soft waves to the shoulders, Margot reviewed notes for an upcoming special issue. "Before we wrap up," Vivian said, as the meeting concluded, "I wanted to acknowledge something. It's been exactly 1 year since you joined us, and in that time, you've transformed not just your own career, but also this magazine." Colleagues around the table murmured agreement and offered congratulatory smiles. "Thank you," Margot replied, genuinely moved. "This job changed my life in ways I never could have anticipated." Later that afternoon, as Margot was preparing to leave for a therapy appointment, a weekly commitment since beginning the transition process, Diana appeared beside the desk. "Anniversary drinks? A few of us are heading to that new place around the corner." Margot hesitated briefly before smiling. "I'd love to. Let me just make a quick call to reschedule something." Seated at a corner table with coworkers who had become friends, nursing a gin and tonic while conversation flowed around her, Margot experienced a moment of profound peace. The path from there to here had been unconventional, beginning with deception but evolving into authenticity. "A toast," Diana proposed, raising her glass. "To Margot, who showed up one day and somehow always belonged here." Clinking glasses with the women around the table, Margot silently corrected. Not always, but now, completely. The name that had once been hastily chosen in a department store now appeared on business cards, bylines, and a book contract. The identity that had begun as performance had become truth. The journey wasn't complete. Medical transition had only just begun. Family relationships remained complicated, and the book would require revisiting personal questions in even greater depth. But the direction was clear now. The path illuminated by choices that had initially seemed desperate, but proved transformative. Raising her glass to return the toast, Margot offered the simple truth that had emerged from a year of living between worlds. To finding yourself by becoming yourself. The evening continued around her. Laughter, stories, plans for future issues and articles. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, hormone therapy appointments, book outline deadlines, an interview with a prominent women's rights activist. But tonight was for celebration, for acknowledging the distance traveled from who she had been to who she had become. In the reflection of the window beside their table, Margot caught a glimpse of herself. Brown hair falling softly around a face that looked both familiar and transformed, eyes showing a confidence that had once been merely performed, but now emanated from within. The woman in the reflection smiled back, no longer a disguise, but a revelation.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!